Most sellers waste thousands of dollars updating their homes only to find out that buyers didn't want those changes. Imagine putting in that shiny new kitchen only to find out that the buyer is actually going to tear it out next month. So my question to you is, are you spending money on renovations that buyers will just undo, or in some cases hate? I want to start today's video by talking about the truth about renovations. And the reality is, major upgrades like kitchens and bathrooms rarely offer a dollar for dollar return on investment. In fact, studies show that the average return on investment is somewhere between 50 to 70%. And that's if you're lucky. As you probably know, if you've been out there considering upgrading your home, you know how expensive this process can be, especially in the market that we're in right now. Because not only are contractors super busy, which likely means you're having to pay more money to have them come into your home, but the cost of materials is also really high. And because of that, you're rarely getting out of something like a kitchen remodel for any less than $50,000. So let's say that you spend $50,000 on a kitchen remodel with custom cabinets, quartz countertop, along with new appliances. And at best, maybe you get $15,000 to $20,000 out of that when you go to sell your home. And here's the best part. The buyer that's buying your house is already planning a full gut on that home for an open layout concept that you didn't see. And the reason this is important is because buyers often remodel a home anyway because they want it to fit their taste. They want it to fit their style. And your idea of modern might be their idea of dated in 5 years, or in some cases 5 minutes. So before you go spend a bunch of money remodeling kitchens and remodeling bathrooms and remodeling things that you think are going to be highlights of your home, make sure you're sitting down with a professional real estate in your market that understands your market, understands your neighborhood, understands how much these improvements actually add to the bottom line, so that you're not throwing good money after bad when it comes to selling your home. Now, before we actually talk about what buyers want, I think it's important to understand that a kitchen remodel isn't just about the money that you're spending going through that remodel. It's also about the time, the headache, the stress, everything that goes along with that project. Rarely ever do you start a project with a contractor on a remodel, say a kitchen, say a bathroom, say a living room, whatever it is, and actually finish on budget, on time. So in my opinion, rather than spending money on all of these things that you think a buyer is going to want, you should rather focus on the things that are actually going to get you more bang for your buck. And with that said, buyers typically want clean, well-maintained homes with no deferred maintenance. In my experience, buyers will forgive old countertops, old cabinets, that sort of thing, but they're not going to forgive an old roof. In fact, as a real estate agent for over 20 years, I often have buyers coming into open houses where I'm representing the seller, and the buyers are asking questions about, when was the plumbing replaced? When was the electrical replaced? When was the water heater replaced? The HVAC, the roof. They're rarely ever asking, well, when was that kitchen remodel done? When was that bathroom remodel done? And that's because buyers are typically looking for updated mechanicals like HVAC, plumbing, electrical. And in many cases, that matters more than the cosmetics. And that's because it shows buyers that sellers took care of the property. You can walk into an old, outdated property that's been well maintained and get a sense of how a seller took care of that home. Whereas on the flip side, I see a lot of flip properties where buyers go in and buy a home, come in, completely remodel it, and try to put it back on the market. And oftentimes these sellers are cutting corners on the things that truly matter, like the electrical, like the plumbing, like the roof, like the HVAC, and rather they're focusing on the cosmetic side. They're focusing on the kitchen and the bathrooms. And in many cases, that will get buyers to buy that home. But what I often hear later down the road is buyers have regrets about buying those homes because the sellers didn't focus on the things that actually mattered in that property. And they were too busy trying to compare it to what they saw on HGTV. So what I recommend for sellers is take care of the things that truly matter, the more expensive things that buyers might have to address if they buy a home. Because if you're taking care of that stuff, many buyers want to make the home their home anyway. They want to make the improvements the way they want them. And so if you've done all the expensive stuff, the HVAC, the roof, the plumbing, the electrical, all of those things, and the house has been well maintained, well, in many cases, a buyer can move into that property and do those improvements over time. But here's what I'll say. I used to sell a lot of foreclosed properties back in the day. And when we would get them from the bank, the properties would be completely distressed. In fact, you would walk into these properties and you would say, I would never live there. Well, the very first things we would do in those properties is we would paint and we would put new flooring in those homes. And what I can tell you is those two improvements have a huge impact on the way a buyer perceives that home. And that's because freshly painted walls signal a sense of care of that home. And new flooring signals move-in ready. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go out and replace the flooring or paint the entire home. But what I would tell you is that if you're planning on spending money in your property, you first spend it on the items that have deferred maintenance. once you've covered that, then you need to focus on freshening up that home, brightening it, if you will, so that buyers feel like it's well maintained. They feel like it's been loved. And on top of that, you want to focus on curb appeal, right? You only get one time to make a first impression. So I think it's important to focus on what a buyer is going to see when they first walk up to that home. In some cases, that means trimming bushes, trimming trees, planting flowers, power washing garage doors, or painting the trim. But in most cases, these aren't costly items, and this is really where I would focus my attention. Now, before we talk about when updating actually backfires, I'd like to take a minute here and ask a favor. If you find any value in my videos at all, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. And if you want to stay updated on everything about selling your home, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Now, in some cases, people have small kitchens and small bathrooms, and they think, well, I'm going to remodel them because it's not really that expensive to do it, and it's a small space, so it's not going to cost that much. But sometimes renovating a small or awkward space can actually backfire and make resale harder. Say, for example, you're redesigning a tiny kitchen to the chef's paradise, if you will, with oversized appliances. While in many cases, buyers might see that space as cramped and not this luxurious thing that you had in mind. Or in some cases, maybe you're redesigning that kitchen, you do a complete remodel on the entire kitchen to have the buyer walk in and say, well, you know what, I'm going to remove that wall that's attached to that kitchen right there to open everything up. Therefore, I'm just going to have to rip this whole kitchen out anyway. So instead of spending money on what you think a buyer wants, you should rather focus on the items that are timeless, the things that aren't going anywhere and aren't going to change as a new style comes out. So my recommendation is focus on fresh paint and use neutral colors, things like beige or grays, because rarely do these colors go out of style. And on top of that, focus on minor cosmetic fixes, things like lighting or hardware. And in some cases, maybe you can swap out that 1980s brass chandelier for a $50 to $75 modern fixture from Home Depot. Another thing that goes a long way, especially in kitchens, is replacing the hardware. In some cases, maybe painting the cabinets instead of ripping the entire kitchen out. On top of that, you really want to declutter. You don't want a lot of stuff in a home. The less stuff in a home, the better, because not only does it make the space feel larger, it also helps buyers see their furniture in the home. And on top of that, you want to deep clean the property. Remove pet odors, but that doesn't mean sticking a bunch of air fresheners in a property, because that can actually backfire. So instead of a bunch of fragrances, just try to maintain a neutral smell. In addition to that, if you have a house that has carpet, but you know there's old hardwood floors underneath it, I would almost recommend removing the carpet entirely, even if the hardwood floors underneath it are scratched. Because for one, those hardwood floors are going to show a lot better in photos, but it also shows buyers that there's a potential to refinish those floors down the road and maybe add some value to their home. And when it comes to selling your home, make sure you sell with strategy and not emotion. Don't renovate out of guilt, like my home isn't good enough, or in some cases stress where you have to fix everything, or lastly, habit, thinking this is what all sellers do. As we said earlier, emotional spending rarely pays off. And on top of that, the earlier you work with a real estate agent, if you're planning on selling, the better off you're going to be, because you can get advice on where to spend your money versus where to keep it. And on top of that, if you're working with an experienced real estate agent, they can tell you where the sweet spot is in the market so that they can help you maximize price and time. You know, as a real estate agent for over 20 years, I've been called into many listing appointments where the seller on the other side felt ashamed of their property. They didn't feel their house was worthy. They didn't feel like they could actually put it on the market. They thought they would have to do an off-market sale just because of the condition in some cases, or just the clutter in general. They just didn't want to mess with it at all. And what I can tell you is that most sellers are emotional about the process, right? It's an emotional thing to sell your home. It's emotional to have people walk through your home. And in some cases, you've lived in that home for your entire life. So everything there bugs you. And you're often comparing your home to every other home that you're looking at online, maybe that you're thinking of purchasing, or maybe you've been watching HGTV and you think that those are the only homes that sell. Well, what I can tell you from experience is that's not the case. Sellers are way harder on themselves than many buyers out there are going to be. In fact, I've taken homes that sellers didn't think we could sell on market, and we've been able to not only put it on market, not do improvements, but get them much more for the home than they ever thought was possible. And that's because we're in tune with the market. We know what's actually happening out there, what's driving buyer demand, what buyers want to see. So if you're considering selling your home, just make sure you're talking to an agent earlier in the process. Now, if you're local to me here, I would love to be that call for you. I would love the opportunity to sit down with you, walk you through a process to help you strategize to figure out what you should focus on when selling your home. Now, if you're out of my area and you happen to be watching this video, reach out to me. I have a network of agents that work directly like I do that I can refer you to so that they can not only hold your hand, but also help you maximize the price. And with that said, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can use that link in the description of the video. Now, remember, when it comes to selling your home, one of my jobs as a real estate agent is to highlight the strengths of your home. We're not going to focus on the things you haven't done. We're going to focus on the things that you have done. We're going to focus on the bones of the property, the neighborhood. We're going to focus on the reasons that you decided to live there to start with. And with that, we're going to highlight the potential in that home so that buyers can see that. And with that said, if your home is dated, one of the things that we can do as real estate agents is help stage that property so that it does show in its best light. I can't tell you how much staging helps buyers see past the dated side of properties, because when a property's empty, or in some cases a property has old furniture in it, the old furniture and the emptiness actually highlights some of the dated things of that home. Whereas if you have a dated home but you bring in more modern finishes, more modern furniture, and you stage it properly, it helps a buyer see past that. It helps them see their furniture. It helps them see themselves enjoying those spaces. So instead of spending a lot of money on remodels that you're not going to get back, I would rather say let's focus on the areas where we know we're going to get the most bang for our buck so that we can ultimately maximize the amount we're putting in your pocket. So before you spend a dime fixing up your home, make sure you're talking to a professional. Not only do I want you to save your cash, I want you to save your sanity. Now, I want you to be completely transparent. What updates were you planning before you watch this video? Do me a favor and drop a comment below. If you are someone that's considering your home and you're using Zillow to get an idea of the value, what I would say is you're going to regret that decision. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, do me a favor and check out this video here.